Hey everybody, welcome back, and we're finally up to the Chapter 3 exercises. So the first one is called minimum. The previous chapter introduced the standard function math.min that returns its smallest argument. We can build something like that now. Write a function min that takes two arguments and returns their minimum. Well, you're probably here because you love the sassy editorializing comments, and it's like, I just don't like this. If we're writing a function, theoretically that function as written takes two parameters. And we could call it with two arguments, but we just found out that we could call functions with a different number of arguments than we define in terms of parameters. I don't like it. But anyway, that's not really that big of a deal. So instead of writing the code here, which we could do, I'm going to write it on Replit. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I want there to be a little bit more error propagation, which is to say if I write code here, I'm not really sure that I like the errors that much. But perhaps we should. Well, we'll write a cheap one here. So we'll say function, what do they want us to call it? Min takes in two arguments. They need parameters. We'll say param1 and param2. And we're going to cheat. We're going to say return math.min param1 and param2. Hooray for the home team. Well, that's kind of cheap though, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take this over to our Replit. We're going to paste it in, and we're going to come up with a solution that actually does something. So we could, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write out a couple of comments. And you might have heard people talk about pseudocode. If we've mentioned pseudocode before, cool. If not, pseudocode is just like, it's a description that is usually language agnostic that can be used to describe what you want your code to do. It helps you kind of think things out first and then write code based on those thoughts, as opposed to just coding your thoughts. Especially at this point, if you're a beginner and you're watching these videos, you probably are going to have a difficult time getting rid of code that you write. So when you're thinking you write code, you're going to want that code to work, so you'll end up throwing in if statements and it just becomes a debacle. So what I would say is we could write out some statements, adjust those statements. When they look good enough, then we can write code that satisfies them. So let's think about some edge cases, right? Because theoretically we could have a situation where the second parameter isn't passed. So maybe something like if param2 is undefined, return param1. And that's an edge case, right? Because that happens in the event that for some reason we forget to call our min function with a second parameter. If we don't give it a second number, then obviously the first one is the min, and the max and the average and everything else because there's only one value. So let's operate under the assumption now that if we get to line 6, or maybe it'd be line 5, but if we get past this first edge case, we assume that both param1 and param2 exist in the code. So I would proffer that there are two conditions. One condition is that param1 is the minimum value, one is that param2 is a minimum value. In cases like that, it can be relatively simple to figure out what to do. We'll say if param1 is less than param2, return param1. Else, maybe we could write otherwise so we don't actually write code, return param2. That seems pretty reasonable. So now let's go ahead and put some code in there. Param2 is equal to undefined. And again, remember, this is our edge case, so this is in the event that we passed in an incorrect number of parameters, arguments. Maybe that's why they always say arguments, is because for all of my complaining, I tend to mix them up just as quickly. We'll say return param1, and we don't really need your code here. If param1 is less than param2, so if param1 is less than param2, and I'm going to thread my curly braces around the rest of everything. And the only reason I'm going to do that is so that afterwards the pseudocode lines up correctly with the code describing it, which is to say that this is the exact same as this. This isn't pseudocode, by the way. We'll say is less than. And return param1, otherwise return param2. All right. So yeah, see, I did it wrong. So we want otherwise basically up here, because the otherwise is describing the else condition. Now, in terms of how important that is, there's few things that are less important than that. The only issue that I would take is that you're going to want consistency above anything else. Consistency is going to be your best friend when you're learning to program in JavaScript, mainly because JavaScript gives you a lot of opportunities to accidentally do something completely different than what you thought you were doing. So since this is a quick problem, let's go ahead and finish it up. Return param2 in the event that it is well, the same or greater. 1. I think I said that backwards. If param1 is less than param2, then we know that param1 is the minimum. Otherwise, we'll just assume that param2 is the minimum. We're going to add in a couple other test cases. One will be min with just one value. And then this, comment line and then an arrow. Well, until JavaScript puts an arrow into their actual, these are actual little mini like arrow, okay, well, never seen that, but that's cool. I would like to use that. Sweet. So that'll be that. And then the last one would be, let's say that they're both the same value. And for this one, hopefully we'd get back 5. Oh, wait. Yeah, nice. We'll get back our 5 value. So I'm going to hit command run. First, I'm going to look at the function, make sure it looks clean. Also, by the way, when you look at the function, it's always going to look clean to you, especially if you just wrote it, because that's how people are. So we hit run by hitting command and then enter. We get 0, -10, 5, or 4 and 5, looking pretty good. I'm going to copy this code. I'm going to bring it, oh boy. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo the accidental keystroke that I just hit. Command Z, Control Z usually just means undo. So we go back to our function. I'm going to replace our cheap function with a expensive function. Anyway, let's go ahead and run it. Let's go ahead and change one of these. Okay, cool. So, looking good. Now that we have all of that, the next thing that we're going to do is grab our function. Well, let's grab the test cases too, why not? And we're going to bring it over to our gist that has the exercise solutions. We'll paste it in here. I'm also going to come in here, excuse me, and, well, now let's leave the pseudocode. I don't see any reason why we can't leave it. But that's it for min. In the next one, we're going to be attacking recursion, so that'll probably be more difficult. Well, it might be, it might not. We'll see when we get there. But thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.